And he was making a point of it that not everybody's treated equal inside of a locker room like that or publicly. And I thought it was a brilliant column. He was at the Combines last week, and I'm very interested to see and hear what he saw there at the Combines. It's kind of like a convention now. USA Today and Pro Football Hall of Fame voter Jarrett Bell joins us now. How you doing?
What's up, Big Dan? How you doing, man?
Very good. How was your convention last week, or as they like to dub it, the Combines? I mean, how was the visit last week?
Yeah, it was good. It's almost essential to be there. I didn't hang out as late as I used to. As time goes on here, I've learned to pace myself with those early 8 o'clock press conferences and stuff. But it was good. I ran into several coaches, caught up with them, some agents, some GMs, some scouts. But I'm still not the one to break down the draft. Not now. Not yet. I can tell you what I saw at the press conferences. That's about and of course that guy Worthy with the record breaking time. He made himself a bunch of money, but yeah, it's an annual deal. I wouldn't want to miss it,
How about this, Jarrett? Is it more of a place of business for GMs and coaches and agents to get there? And again, I'm like you. I really don't care what the guy's name says on the back of the jersey. I'm more about needs. So I'm not going to sit here and break down a guy from Fond du Lac, Wisconsin like you either. That's not what I'm doing. But if a team needs an outside linebacker, edge, corner, safety, what have you, that's kind of what you're looking at on a position group. But has the Combines become more of that, where it's really a place of business where you get to know potentially that there's someone that's going to be available next week?
Yeah, no doubt about it. And then I think, like, for the teams, they'll be interested in certain guys, and it's an opportunity for them to have some face time. But the real face time is going to come, in the coming weeks. If they go to when they go to the pro day, they set up some workout visits. Prospects start crisscrossing the country and going to visit different headquarters. So there are more opportunities for that. But from a media standpoint, I'm not one of these guys who is spending the entire year forecasting the draft. I mean, there are people who do that, and they do it very, very well, right? I mean, there's a cottage industry, start with Mel Kiper, right? Still. But so for me as a media guy, Dan, I'm just trying to catch up. I'm trying to catch up and I watched a few college games because I'm always traveling on Saturdays, right? So,
right.
I saw what I saw, and it was an opportunity just to kind of put faces with names. That D tackle from Florida State, I know you like him.
Yeah, Jared Verse. Yeah, he's the fact that he's at FSU, not so much, but hey, I mean, they've been producing Brian Burns and Josh Sweat. They've been putting out some really good DNs over the last couple years here. Let me ask you this though: did you get a chance to see Jason Kelce's retirement speech?
I did not, but I still remember his Super Bowl speech. So I think it was like the greatest Super Bowl parade speech in NFL history. So if it was anything like that, I saw a lot of the comments, but I did not see the column. But, just in covering the NFL and being around the Eagles, obviously, so many times, I mean, he's just a good dude, right? I love talking to him in the locker room, getting him to break down stuff or asking him stuff and just tapping into it. So yeah, he'll be around the NFL. We know that in some form or fashion. He's probably got a media deal coming. He may be on one of these primetime games or something. So we know we haven't heard the last of him, and he'll just really explode as a presence. But he always just struck me as a level-headed guy. And like you mentioned, the column I wrote on his brother Travis after the Super Bowl, when they did their next podcast, Jason was like, "Hey, dude, you crossed the line." So even in that type of situation, I mean, his credibility, was emboldened just because he called his brother out. Now he didn't call him out quite like I did, and maybe some others, but he didn't just let it slide either.
Jarrett, why are black athletes covered differently than white athletes then?
I think it's societal, really. I do, and I also think that in our culture and even like the media culture, sometimes people don't fully understand certain things, and that's not just in the media. I mean, that's in corporate America. That's in boardrooms all over the place and advertising and so on and so forth. So I think that it's all. I mean, shoot, why do more black men have run-ins with police officers than white people? Why then every time we hear a story of somebody who was wrongfully convicted and they spent like 20 years in jail or 30 years in jail, you tell me when the last time you saw a white guy get released on a wrongful conviction. Every time you see one of these stories, I challenge you, and the next time you see one, hopefully you won't see many, but every time that we see that particular story, it's always a black person. Okay. And so I think that's kind of, the answer to that, really.
I got Warren Moon on later on today at 5:30, and I want to expand on that one last question here. Do you think the pressures of black quarterbacks, athletes today, especially the African-American athletes, that when it's about money today versus opportunity, back in the day where they didn't want to give opportunity because these $50 million deals now, I mean, many of these owners want to win now, Jarrett. I mean, if you look at the top paid quarterbacks in the league, 90% of them are African-American. However, they're quick to move off those deals if those deals don't come to fruition. Like, I mean, there's a lot of pressure. Is it just more about the money today than the opportunity that it was back in the day?
I mean, that's a great question. And it really requires, a deep dive because there's definitely the opportunity now. I mean, there was a time, Dan, probably when you played, where you rarely saw a black quarterback as the backup. It was kind of like if he wasn't good enough to be the starter, then he wasn't going to get a backup job. And, you can last 10 years, 15 years in NFL as a backup and make a ton of money.
Chase Daniels made $62 million. And I don't know how many snaps did he take? 10?
He didn't take 62.
That's right.
So that's kind of part of my point. But, to the point about pressure, if it's there, it's there. I mean, that's the job, right? And we know that pressure for any quarterback, black, white, green, whatever, can be different. And it could depend on, oftentimes your supporting cast and the coaching and the system and, all of the other factors that make quarterbacks successful or not. So I don't know if, guys are not getting the full opportunity to cash in on their talent once they get that opportunity. But I think that there are always so many other factors that go into whether or not you're a good quarterback or not. Because I've seen, white quarterbacks not cut it and they're gone, and black quarterbacks not cut it and they're gone. So I think the real positive is that, we're having a conversation where, half of the league starting quarterbacks are black, unlike, a couple decades ago when we were talking about, could this guy even get an opportunity?
Absolutely. I mean, we're moving the sticks forward and the chains forward.
Sorry to interrupt, but you got Warren Moon coming on. That's wonderful. He's just a classic case where, a guy had to go to Canada to really, just bolster his NFL marketability. And oh, by the way, he only went to Canada and won 4 straight Grey Cups, but
4 and 5 years.
Yeah. But should not have even had to do that when you think about his college career. And so, for Warren Moon to be the first black quarterback selected to the Hall of Fame is a good deal for him. But hate that he had to kind of go the route that he did. But still in all, just so glad that he had the career that he had in Canada and in the NFL.
Absolutely. Well, many of the players today stand on his shoulders. So that's something that he'll always be able to put out there, that he was one of the first. Him, Doug Williams, James Harris, and those guys were the first people to do this here. And Briscoe from Denver, too. We got to give him honor. Jaylen Herz. I said this, and tell me if I'm off here, Jarrett, and how you see him. His first year starting, like every other quarterback, goes through trials and tribulations. His second year in 22, he was an MVP candidate. Last year, he had 18 turnovers. I mean, who is Jaylen Herz in your opinion? And do you think he's still the guy, or is this 2025 season? Is this the year that he's really got, or 2024 season, that he has to go out there and show that the money they gave him is rightfully his job to lose? I mean, because who is he? We've seen three different Hertzes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair question just because he is the quarterback. He's in that position. They've committed the dollars to him. I still think he's the player who almost won the Super Bowl, right? He did have an unfortunate turnover in that game and fumble, and if not for that, they may have won, or probably some people will tell you probably would have won the Super Bowl. But, that being said, he did get a team to the Super Bowl. You go back not too long ago, and Carson Wentz was that guy in Philadelphia, right? With the big contract and with the big expectations. So, Jaylen Herz, he's going to have to prove it, but that's kind of every year. And it always depends on, how certain contracts are structured to see how much, give and take you have. But the pressure is the pressure. And I don't think Jaylen Herz is going to run from that. I think last year, and I went to several games, it's just really a trip, Dan, that the Eagles were like undefeated and or whatever, had the best
10-1.
Yeah. And then it just, collapsed, man. But Jaylen Herz was hurt for much of the season. And so he wasn't himself, even though he gutted it out and did, what he did, to give his team the best chance. But there were a lot of other problems that kind of were exposed as they kind of collapsed, looking at the defense. And I mean, how can Hassan Reddick, they put Matt Patricia in as the D coordinator, and then all of a sudden Hassan Reddick, who has been one of the elite pass rushers in the NFL over the last, 3-4 years, and he gets like, I don't know, one sack the last, several games of the year. So there are a lot of things that contributed to the Eagles' collapse. But I think Jaylen Herz, it's way too early to say that, he's not capable of being that guy. Now, one thing that is significant, they changed coordinators. So Shane Steichen, who did such a strong job in Indianapolis in his first year, I mean, he left. That was the QB whisperer for Jaylen Herz the year before. So maybe that's got something to do with it as well.
I think you're onto it here, and this is where I'm going here. And tell me if you agree or disagree here. I think Kellen Moore is the coach in waiting, and here's why. If you look around the league, Jarrett, I mean, Andy Reid, play caller, Mahomes, Sean McVay, play calling head coach, Kyle Shanahan, play calling head coach, the guy up in Green Bay, Matt LaFleur, play calling head coach. There's like a fail-safe that if your coaching staff gets raided when it comes to having taken a team to a Super Bowl or doing well, your coordinator is going to leave and go to some place like Chicago or wherever a job's going to be open. And there are you again, back in the mix there. I'm looking for another coordinator. That'll be 4 and 5 years for Hertz, counting Sirianni's first year when he was here back in 20. My point is, if he does well, Kellen Moore, and Hertz does well, and he just went through a sit-down with the owner and whether or not he was going to be retained, Sirianni, how do you just let Kellen Moore walk out the building and you just had a powwow with a coach who you weren't sure if bringing back? I mean, I look at this guy here, no matter what he does, I don't know what Sirianni could do to keep his job.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great, perspective on it. It really is, because when you think about, obviously the offensive coaches and the coordinators have been, the hottest properties on the head coaching market over a number of years. And I've always been one to say, hey, you want a leader of men, and look at Bill Belichick and look at Mike Tomlin from the defensive side. And there's a lot to be said for that as well. But to your point, it's like if you are the play caller and the coordinator, and if you're the head coach on top of that, or say you're the head coach and the play caller, like a lot of them are, like Andy Reid, Doug Peterson, blah, blah. Okay, so when you're in that situation as the head coach, if anything happens at the quarterback position, the man that's most powerful on the coaching staff has got his fingerprints on it already, right? And the quarterback is the most important, player in football. We know that. So I think there's something to that that just kind of adds value. Now, to your point about Kellen Moore being a guy who could leave, it could happen. But if you don't see him as a strong leader in that position, then maybe you just let him walk. I mean, the Cowboys let him walk. Okay, I mean, they kept him around and gave him extensions and made it sweet for him to stay for a couple of years. But look at what's going on now, Mike McCarthy, and then we'll see where that goes a year from now, what we're talking about a year from now. But the point being is that I've seen some of these coordinators as well, offensive and defensive, get fast-tracked to that head coaching job, and they really just can't cut it because they are not your Mike Tomlin or your Bill Belichick with the ability to command the whole team. Now, I mentioned Belichick, and I'd be remiss not to say Belichick had Tom Brady, but you know my point. Belichick helped make Brady, into the player that he was, and Brady helped make Belichick into the coach that he was. But point being, you want to have that coach that can still command the entire room. And some of these coordinators, they don't get it. Some get it, and some are there, and they make that natural ascent, and it works. But others, not so. So I'm not sure about Kellen Moore on, from that regard, at least from my vantage point.
Jarrett, I'll tell you what, and I think your comment about Brady and Belichick, I think that, you look beyond not just that relationship, because let's not forget, at one time, 2 years ago, Jacoby Brissett, Mac Jones, Tom Brady, hell, you even had a guy in Matt Castle who never started down at USC, won a division title in Kansas City. They drafted him in the 7th round. It wasn't like that guy couldn't develop and find quarterbacks. He had Jimmy Garoppolo too, who was also a starter. So he had 4 starters at one time. So he knew the position. And I mean, I think he gets really not a lot of credit because everyone goes, well, it's Brady. I'm like, hey man, this guy found 4 starters at one time, and he drafted him, not one of those guys in the 1st round, except for Mac Jones. So again, I think you look at that, and that leads me to the NFL with you. Russell Wilson, do you think it'll be a strong market for him, or do you think that there'll be a soft market for him?
I think there'll be strong interest, and I think a lot of this is going to depend on, what Russell is looking for. And if I'm Russell, I want to be a starter still, okay? So I can't blame him for that. That may fit with some teams, and a lot's going to depend on, how these musical chairs, evolve over the next few weeks. If Kirk Cousins leaves Minnesota, for example, then, maybe that's a landing spot for Russell Wilson. If Baker Mayfield doesn't get a deal done with the Bucs and he goes, back on the market, then okay, Russell Wilson's in the mix there. If there's a team like Washington who's going to have a rookie quarterback, but they want a veteran guy to see where they can go immediately, well, maybe Russell Wilson's that guy. And then the market's going to be stronger because the Broncos are going to be paying the money, going to be footing the bill. And so I think that's the dynamic that really makes Russell Wilson attractive to anybody who's even thinking about it. And remember, Dan, we just came off of a season where we had so many backup quarterbacks that had to play. I want to say it was the record. It may not have been.
68 total quarterbacks played last year, and it was a record.
Yeah. So there you go. Thanks for that. So, just knowing kind of the vulnerability of that position, there's going to be a market there. And maybe he can just call Joe Flacco and say, okay, how'd you do that? So, there'll be a market for Russell Wilson. I don't think he wants to go to Joe Flacco route, by the way, and wait until the season and be an emergency guy at all. But, this has happened early enough for him that he will get, strong looks from a lot of people. Now, like I said, the question will be, does he want to go in and say, okay, I'll have to compete, or be the backup waiting for the starter to get injured or whatever? Not sure.
You know what, though, Jarrett? I tell you, this has got Pittsburgh all over it. And to me, Mike Tomlin took a team to the playoffs with a guy named Mason Rudolph.
Yeah.
I mean, Mason Rudolph. Last year, Russell Wilson had 26 touchdowns, 8 picks. He wasn't horrible. Now, low volume of passes, I get it. Quarterback rating was higher than even Lamar's. I mean, we're not talking about a horrific year here. And like you said, this year, $39 million is picked up by the Broncos. Next year, $37 million. Isn't this like a Pittsburgh deal? He signs for the league minimum of $1.29 million. You take that off to 39. They're still on the hook for $38 million, $37 million. This just looks like Pittsburgh and Mike Tomlin all over it.
Yeah, I couldn't argue that at all, especially after watching the Steelers and what they did at quarterback last season and how they just kind of, scraped it. They got there. But the thing about Russell Wilson too that's going to be interesting, you mentioned his passing numbers, and they were respectable, if not good too. But some of the turnovers that he had 55 sacks, right? Which tells you maybe he held on to the ball a little bit too much. They were not very good in the red zone. So I think when you look at some of those things on top of the passing marks, you say, okay, maybe that's why. But still, that's a lot of money to be thrown away without giving it another year to see where it goes. So, I think Sean Payton knows he's got to get a rookie quarterback and have somebody who can come in and be his guy on a rookie contract to kind of help make up for, the salary cap deficit that they're going to have.
Gee, Jarrett, you sit down in that room with the other 49 men that are friends of mine. I'm on some panels. People, they text me, ask me about what do I think of these final 15 guys, and I give some of the perspective and I have. I look at Sean Payton. He's 9-7 in the postseason, and he's had one quarterback. And people like to throw the shade at Belichick and go, "Well, he had Brady." Well, I'm trying to figure out what Sean Payton is without Drew Brees, and just the perspective on him. Here's a guy with Bountygate that was suspended out of the game. Here's a guy that, if you look at his numbers, really outside of not having Brees, I don't know. How do you look at him as a coach? Is he overhyped? I'm not saying overrated, but is he overhyped? He's 9-7.
Yeah, I mean, valid questions. I think Sean Payton underachieved in New Orleans, really, when you look at having Drew Brees there. They had that one situation where it was all set up for them to go to the Super Bowl, and they had that bogus call. But even with that, I mean, there was questions about how they managed the game, how Sean managed the game to even get into that situation. So we're gonna, really find out about Sean Payton and his legacy, really, as a great coach, with what's going to happen here in Denver over the next 3 years. And so, it's good that he's got an opportunity to kind of prove, his worthiness as even like a Hall of Fame coach. But yeah, he won a Super Bowl and did a phenomenal job there. Great job in getting the Saints back, after Katrina and building them into a consistent winner. So there's that. But yeah, you can definitely look at, some of the opportunities that didn't happen. But I will say this: when he didn't have Drew Brees, and the times that Drew Brees, suffered some injuries, Sean Payton was really good with some backup quarterbacks. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater was 5-0 one year, and there are some other cases.
Taysom Hill.
Yeah, he did a great job with, like you said, Taysom Hill. And so, Sean is a very, creative mind when it comes to, putting together offenses. And so I know he's got that going for him. Now let's see if he can really put it together in Denver. I think if he can, and hey, oh, by the way, he's in the toughest division in the NFL, at least the most exciting division, with Harbaugh there, and of course the Chiefs. We'll see what happens with the Raiders, but they're going to have a lot of energy. So it's going to be fun to watch.
Couple last questions here for you, Jarrett. Okay, you've covered this man, and I know you've been at camp with him when he was in Philly. Now you're looking at him in Kansas City. We're looking at two different Andy Reids, aren't we? Because the Andy Reid I saw in Philly, time management going into halftime and at the end of ball games and all that, I'm like, I don't know, man. I mean, Well, I don't. The guy I see now, I see these skilled plays at end of games. Is it Mahomes? Is it Reid? Did he learn from what happened? There's two different guys here, aren't there?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, he was successful in Philly. We know that, but not to the degree that he is in Kansas City. So I think part of it, yeah, you can, you've got to start with Mahomes. Okay, but the thing with Mahomes, it started way back in the draft. Like, this is the guy we want. Go to the Chicago Bears, taking Trubisky or whatever. So, that is on Andy Reid's resume.
And they passed on Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so. You look at, just getting Mahomes, building the system around him, all of that, and you've got that. I mean, I thought a couple years ago when Tyreek Hill left, it's like, oh, no way, and they've won 2 Super Bowls since Tyreek the Cheetah left. So I think Andy Reid has grown as a coach, as you would expect. Mahomes has definitely helped that, but Reid has definitely been that steady force. And you look at how they've done it in Kansas City, just kind of, him being that mellow guy who is, so crafty at what he does. And so he's better now than he was in Philly, but he was pretty darn good in Philly as well. But with the championship rings now and the commercials, Andy Reid did not do commercials in Philly, right? Now he's this lovable, this lovable figure, man, that everybody, loves. But yeah, Mahomes definitely, you got to know what to do with certain guys as well. So he gets credit for that.
Final question for you. Now, I hear this all the time. Is Jerry going to do this? Is Jerry going to do that? Is Jerry going to do this with Dak? I'll put this out there to you. For Dak Prescott to solidify his resume and for him to be considered truly one of the best, I think he has to leave Dallas. Ooh. You're not going to win a Super Bowl in Dallas. Have a general manager that hasn't replicated or duplicated anything that Jimmy Johnson did. If he's such a great GM and he was so instrumental in that part of it back with those 5 years with Jimmy, why hasn't he duplicated it since? I mean, they're one and done. The Cincinnati Bengals now have more postseason wins in the last 25 years than the Cowboys do. I mean, if Dak chases the money, you're further away from a title. You give him 60. Tyron Smith now has to be taken off the roster because you can't pay him. I mean, if you're Dallas, you're Dak, and you're Jerry, how do you see this story playing out?
Yeah, it's interesting because even with the salary cap going up much more than NFL people expected, the Cowboys are still in a of a situation.
$14 million in the hole as of today.
Yeah. I mean, Saquon Barkley would be great in that offense, but they can't afford that. There was a time when that would have been, they would have been one of the top, suitors, right? But right now they've got to deal with this salary cap and then Dak's contract. So, maybe they'll find out something with Trey Lance. And this is not even answering your question, to tell you the truth, because, maybe that's a future option for them, and they'll see what they saw so far in practices over the past, season, and then into the off season next, maybe some kind of option. But because I think that the thing the Cowboys could do is just pay Dak and then let him walk next year versus doing the extension at that exorbitant number and getting some temporary relief to let you do.
Hopefully we're able to finish up here with Jarrett here. I'd like to hear his
somebody else can we get somebody else to give us the production Dak Prescott gives us? We know what we've got in Dak, and Dak's got to raise it in the playoffs too. But there's a lot of people that need to raise it in the playoffs. But hey, one final thought on the Cowboys, most valuable team in the NFL. Fans galore, tickets, money, commercials,
Okay, I think we're getting a little bit of an issue here, and we're a little stuck here a little bit here. So, all right, that's all good here. Let's see if we can finish up here with Jarrett. I want to at least say goodbye to him because that was here. Here we go. He's back. There, we got you back here, Jarrett. Jarrett, we got you back here. Gotcha. Okay. And the Cowboys, man, they got all the money, they got all the fame, but they got no wins.
It's tough, man. There's generations of Cowboys fans who've never seen them play in the Super Bowl. It's incredible, and then they're still like the most popular team.
It doesn't make sense. I'm with you. Hey, Jarrett, thank you so much for doing this. I can't thank you enough, man. We reached out to you when you were at the Combines, and you found time for me today. I'll make sure I tell Warren hi for you when we get him on at 5:30. I know he reveres you. He said, "Oh my God, tell Jarrett hi." I want you to know that too. So, thank you so much, my friend.
All right, my man. Take care. Thanks a lot.
You got it. The great Jarrett Bell. Make sure you check him out. USA Today Sports, Pro Football Hall of Fame voter. Does such a great job, man, when it comes to covering the National Football League. All right. We're going to go into our exercise that we started with how we looked at the roster. Plus, I have another topic question for you. And we haven't even got to the second part of it with Nick and Kellen. We'll do that. More NFL news. Warren Moon, 5:30 Eastern. Hit the like button. Keep it here, National Football Show.